Today I'm making a video about the human microbiome, and I'm going to start out by talking shit. Now, when I say talking shit, I really mean talking about the digestive system, which of course incorporates shit. So, we get energy from oxygen and from vitamins and nutrients that we can't artificially produce like a plant might be able to. And we use food that we then convert into starches. Most foods are converted into starches and then converted into sugars. And those sugars, the place where that is done is in the gut, at least as far as I know. And there are so many bacteria in the gut that are supposed to be there. They're called flora and fauna. They're dangerous, of course. If you were to have an ulcer or a hole in your intestines anywhere along the line, you would have bacteria leaking into your body that would kill you very quickly from infection. I think it's called sepsis. Yeah, but that's the specific infection of having your guts opened and dying from that. But those bacteria need to be there, because if you didn't have them there, then whatever you ate, you wouldn't be able to do much with, because they do a lot of those chemical conversions. I mean, the food goes into your stomach and it's already been broken up by your teeth and everything, and going down the esophagus kind of squeezes it, and when it gets into your stomach puts out a proportional amount of acid to digest the material, and it doesn't completely digest it, it just breaks it down, and then I think it goes into other organs, or maybe it goes into other organs before the stomach. I'm not sure about that. But eventually it comes to the gut, which is where the actual obtaining of the energy from the food is like, that's where that comes from. And you can tell a lot of chemistry and stuff is done in the gut because you can eat some food that tastes delicious and smells really good, and your shit, it kind of varies in smell, but it smells terrible. By it varies in smell, it depends on what you eat. If you are a carnivore, then your shit will smell a lot worse than if you are a vegetarian. That's just a fact. And of course, shit smells bad either way. And it's possible that it actually just has a strong smell, which to certain animals like dogs is good. And they use that to obtain information that we would normally obtain from the other person by speaking to them or meeting them. The dog can smell someone's shit and tell how old they are, and probably what species they are, and probably other things that we wouldn't even think about because we don't have the part of our brain for associating that smell. Our noses are very simple. They do things that, like, they tell us that shit smells bad. Even though it may contain a lot of information, it's because, if you happen to ingest some, it's like full of bacteria and can make you really sick, and so that's why it smells bad to us. Otherwise, it could smell good. There's some things that people think smell bad that I think smell good, like tuna and salmon, but, they have a strong smell. It's an acquired smell. But with us, we're programmed to smell that the smell of shit is bad. And that's good, because we shouldn't be around shit. It's unsanitary, and that's why, another reason why. But so, the bacteria are what the dog smells in its shit, most likely. It probably smells other things too, but it's mostly the bacteria, and that's why they eat some of it sometimes. But they get bacteria from it, and of course they can get sick from it. But I'm not quite sure. The dogs must have something to process the eating feces thing, but for us, it's clear that we shouldn't be eating that kind of stuff. And it's clear that it's unsanitary. If it's just left around, flies will breed in it because it's nutrient dense. You can use your poop to fertilize plants. It is nutrient dense, but it's also had most of the nutrients that you can use taken out of it by bacteria going in, producing, obtaining their food for the day from whatever you've eaten, and then converting it into something that your gut can use, or converting it into something that your gut can then convert into something and use, or something like that. I don't know the exact details of these chemical processes, but I know that there's a lot of them, and there are trillions of bacteria in your gut. And in your gut is not the only place where there's bacteria. There's also a lot of bacteria in your mouth and in your nose, and there's not as much bacteria in your eyes, but I'm sure there's some, because like most of the bacteria is in the gut, and then the second line of bacteria is probably in the orifices and the epidermis. I think I said that right. Yeah. The epidermis is basically like saying your skin outside covering, so that, refers to all things on your skin, like hair follicles and pores. And there are even like microscopic insect-like creatures that live among the microbiome on your skin. We have, I can't remember its name, E. coli, I think that's the name, of bacteria that commonly lives in our skin. It can also be something that if you have in your gut can be really bad for you. And at least I think that's what I'm sure. I'm not sure about some of those chemical details. You could look those up, but I'm pretty sure E. coli. There's different kinds of E. coli, but there's a kind of E. coli that lives in your skin, and it's not good for infections. And there are plenty of bacteria that aren't good for infections, but there's a lot of bacteria that are on your skin that are serving some sort of beneficial purpose, like bacteria or like microscopic insects that maybe eat some of the flaked hair from the inside of hair follicles so that they don't hurt when they're like pulled a little bit or bent in a different direction, or things that are not beneficial, where they're just there and they're kind of in a neutral state, but they're still benefiting us because they're bacteria that, say, maybe live around your gut, but they don't cause any harm, but they kill other bacteria that do cause harm. Or maybe just places where your skin could easily get infected from fungus, like the ringworm or jock itch or athlete's foot, which are pretty much the same kind of fungus, but different strands. But you can get one from the other, so pretty much the same fungus. But that's an example of an infection that's not a bacterial infection, but the bacteria might help you in that situation. If you have the proper bacteria on your skin, you might be less likely to be able to get affected by ringworm. Or, these are just hypothetical scenarios. I don't know these exact examples to be true, but there are definitely things like this going on the microscopic level on our skin. You can look up the human microbiome and you can find a lot of information about the epidermal microbiome and the microbiome that lives in your orifices and in your gut. And there's probably even bacteria that live in other parts of your organ. I know that there's one that stores bacteria, the appendix, I think it's the appendix. Yeah, and it can burst because it's like full of bacteria that it stores. It's supposed to store it for a beneficial reason, like maybe like a seed vault for bacteria, I'm not sure, but it can get full and burst, and then you have like bacteria everywhere and you get sepsis, and that's why it's dangerous if your appendix bursts. And that's why they used to just remove it, but now they don't really know why it's there, and it's probably there for a good reason. And the other thing I was going to say is that there are more bacteria cells in and on your body than there are your own cells. That might even mean that more of your mass is composed of bacterial cells, I'm not sure. Probably not more, because I'm sure that our cells are bigger than bacteria, but bacteria vary in size a lot, so that's not necessarily true. But these kinds of things are essential to our everyday life. There are bacteria that are supposed to live in certain places, like, I'd imagine there's probably bacteria that live inside the uterus, not the uterus directly, what's it called? The vaginal canal, or the surface area. Because there's certainly bacteria that are supposed to live around a man's genitals, around, like, the glands, but that bacteria can't be there if the person is circumcised, so they can have other problems and get less sensitive. But that's a whole other topic. But the bacteria there is very important. If you don't have it, then you have to moisturize certain parts of your sensitive areas, otherwise they will crack and bleed. And that's something I learned online from just kind of reading. And I'm like, oh geez, I'm glad my mom didn't say circumcise me when I was a kid. But, or I guess better yet, when you're a baby. Because, that's not a good thing to do. Because it's not something that the child can make. If they really want to remove part of their genitals when they're older, they can do it. They can go under anesthesia or local anesthetic that make them not feel it and all that kind of stuff. But, it's like a freaky procedure in my opinion. But you also have to keep in mind that if you're really dirty, you don't have access to being clean. Like, for example, the people that crossed on the ships that got here from Europe, many of them had no way of keeping clean, and so they were circumcised because that area doesn't have as much bacteria buildup. But if you, shower regularly, or, even just have access to a shower once in a while, then you can control that amount of bacteria, and you won't get infections in certain spots that you would otherwise. And so that's why the foreskin is considered bad, or was considered bad. But it's only bad if you don't shower for several months at a time or something, because you can be vulnerable to infection. But that's also true anywhere. If you don't shower for several months at a time and you get a cut, you'll be more vulnerable to infection because there's more dirt and bacteria on your skin. But at the same time, there are beneficial bacteria that protect from those bacteria. But if you were to, it would be very interesting to be a scientist who would look at the bacteria that are harmful and the ones that are not, specifically for benefiting us in certain situations like I was just talking about. Because we could get a lot of information about that. But so yeah, covered a lot more stuff than just the microbiome here, but almost everything I've talked about in this video some way relates to the microbiome. And it's the kind of thing that's very important. It's a foreign organism that kind of trains your immune system, because obviously your immune system doesn't just attack your gut bacteria, because if it did, you wouldn't be able to digest properly. You'd be like shitting out undigested food that's just been broken up into matter by your stomach. And there are still things that, of course, we can't digest, like corn. You can see that in your, what's the polite word for it? Scat? I don't know. But, and there's other kinds of things that we can't properly digest. But if you didn't have gut bacteria, you would probably obtain almost no nutrients from your food, which would be really bad. That would basically mean you'd starve to death no matter how much you ate. And that's pretty important. So these bacteria, new scientific studies I read in Science News say that they might even train your immune system, because, your immune system has to recognize bad bacteria and good bacteria, because if it kills the good bacteria, then the bad bacteria will take over, and then you get infected everywhere. But so that's how the immune systems are trained. In fact, the Science News article said that some autoimmune dysfunctions could be caused by certain kinds of unhealthy diets, like diets that have an excess of certain things like saturated fats and sodium, which they mean sodium chloride, not just sodium, the kind that when it reacts with water explodes. I think it's sodium or sulfur. No, sodium. Yeah. But sodium chloride, which, it's funny, sodium is a metal that explodes when in contact with water, and chlorine is obviously poisonous. But together they make a compound that we eat and we use for important things like perspiration, and it's really impressive that that we can function on that kind of stuff, but at the same time, if you have too much of it, if you have too much salt, it can cause like high blood pressure, and it can probably cause other problems that have yet to be researched. And darn, I should have like listed something so I can't like forget what I was gonna say next. But so yeah, certain things to excess or in the wrong situations are unhealthy, like eating food with a lot of fat. If you are using a lot of calories or hiking on a trail or in a really cold place, then food with fat is good. It helps you. It's like energy that your body can use. And if you're like, on the Appalachian Trail or something, you probably won't get much of any of that fat, like actually getting fat, because your body will use it all. But if you're actually just like eating a bunch of fettuccine alfredo and you like don't get much exercise, or anything that's like heavy in fats, but fettuccine alfredo is a good example, or just alfredo. But those are good in certain circumstances, but if you don't need them, then they can cause problems. And this is all kind of stuff that's still being researched by Science News. Well, not by Science News, but by the sources of the Science News magazine. And so basically, in conclusion, the immune system and the bacteria work together in a way, or they should work together in a way that, like, you can consider the essentialness of the bacteria to be like an organ, because, as I mentioned, they have several benefits depending on what kind of bacteria it is and where it is. And of course there's detrimental ones, but that's where your immune system works in flow with the microbiome of your body. And when it's done properly, it looks like the bacterial system is just another organ that's being regulated by organs in the immune system. And that's pretty cool. Hopefully we can get into some serious science someday that will teach us those kinds of things in great detail, like we can understand them so that we can have our immune system be as effective as possible and be as healthy as possible. Because, you can still eat tasty food that's not fat. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of good tasting fatty food, but there's also a lot of good tasting food that's not fat. And so if you're just sitting around and you just feel like munching on something, if you like it, eat celery. That has like almost no calories. There are other things that have like almost no calories. Popcorn, if it's just popcorn maybe with some salt or something, unless it's like lathered in oil or butter or something, it's just going to have very little calories. So you can eat like a ton of plain salted popcorn and it wouldn't really be much food at all. I mean, you might get full, but it wouldn't be a lot of calories. But if you're eating like butter-covered popcorn, which is good, but at the same time, that's especially unhealthy. And I'm the kind of person where, like, when I taste some artificial butter in some popcorn, or even when I see it, it's just like, oh, what's this yellow artificial stuff that's clearly not butter that's like on my popcorn? And I guess it's because there's a lot of fat people in America here, and so we have to have artificial butter and things like margarine, which margarine is better than nothing, but I would much prefer butter. But you have to take it into proportion. If you're going to have a meal that's using butter or has a lot of cheese or something fattening in it, then you should take an exerting bike ride beforehand or the next day or something like that, because that will help burn it off. It would especially help if it's really cold outside, because if you're really cold and you're exerting yourself, then as long as you don't sweat too much and freeze, then you'll be using up a ton of calories. Because of course if you freeze, then you won't be able to use calories because you'll be dead. But so yeah, this is almost 20 minutes long, so I'm going to stop it now. I've talked a lot of stuff. My video is not necessarily the most cohesive, and hopefully I didn't use so much terminology that people couldn't understand what I'm talking about. But if you didn't understand me, look up the words. Don't be ignorant.